afternoon, and welcome to A Beer with Old Growler. I'm Pete LaFrance, the Old Growler, and I'm glad you are here with me today. Today is the 22nd day of May 2020, and this is the 45th Old Growler in a row. We've been streaming every weekday for the last 45 weekdays, and that's quite an accomplishment. We'll be hitting our 50th next week. We'll have a special celebration for that, I assure you. And this is the 67th day of what we call shelter in place, or here in New York, it's called a pause. And so we have paused. We pause for station identification. No, we don't. What we're going to do is, if you want to know what the Old Growler is all about, just go to the front page of this channel. There is a trailer there, and I'm there to explain it all to you as to why we're here today. But I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach down here. I'm going to come up with a growler. I got a nice growler here that is full of, it's full of beer. I know that. And I know I just got it. And I know the only way I can keep track of things is if I have the receipt. And the receipt is going to tell me the truth. The truth shall set you retreat. Oh, we've got Mermaid Pilsner from Coney Island. And I might have had that yesterday or the day before. It gets all. Come on. Here we go. What we need is a beer. And this is a beer. Well, it's not a beer, it's a growler. Again, from the kids over at the Henry Street Ale House, right across the way in Brooklyn Heights. And it's time to pour a beer. We're going to do it nice and gently this time. Well, there we go. We couldn't have done better if it was on draft. Draft beer, not boys. 1969. All right, here we go. It's 5:03, and for those of you who are with me, I see there's a couple of folks with me right now, and I've got a thumbs up. Well, here's a thumbs up to you too. Cheers for Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. I don't want a copyright infringement there, so thank goodness it's Friday. That's a nice Pilsner. It doesn't have the apple flavor that Budweiser has, that many of the others have. It's a nice clear beer there. Oh, wow, look at that. You can see the Old Growler through it. Look. Whoa, that's a scary picture. Nah, not that really. Oh, excellent. Well, today is a cloudy day and humid, a little humid. In fact, it's a little too humid for the Old Growler to have his turtleneck on. We might have to switch to t-shirts in a few days, although I don't think so. The weather's been going up and down, up and down. Well, we kind of wish it would rain, actually. That'd keep people inside, number one. We got the holiday coming up, and Memorial Day on Monday, the 25th. And that's going to be interesting. For the folks who are slowly going cabin crazy. And that's one of the reasons, the other reasons that I started doing the Old Growler is to keep track of the days of staying home. I've decided to do the best thing and simply to stay home and not go out. Is the only reason I go out is to pick up the growler for the Old Growler. And in the mornings, we'll walk across the Brooklyn Bridge when there's hardly anybody there, around 7 o'clock, 7:30. And it's always fun. We've been doing it for, again, almost 50 days. We started a week before the Old Growler started. So, yeah, about 50 days. Half 100 days across the bridge. That's 1.5 miles across on the pedestrian walkway. So that's 3 miles round trip. 3 miles round trip times 50. You do the math. I can't do it. 150 miles, something like that. So we've been doing a little bit of walking. I like to think that I'm channeling Alden Partridge, the founder of Norwich University, who used to march the cadets 25, 30 miles a day and think nothing of it. So perhaps I'm channeling the the captain. Here's to the captain. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. For those of you who have not been here before and who might be watching this on a day other than a dreary afternoon called on the 22nd of May, 2020. The Old Growler's here because he used to, I told you I was going to explain, well, I'm going to have to explain a little bit because that's how we do a tasting, which we're going to do in a little bit. We used to do tastings on Thursdays. We would, myself, the manager and bartender over at the Henry Street Ale House, and my buddy Jim Bennis, Bennis, yeah. And usually there was either 2 or 3 tourists or some other folks that happened to drop in. And we would do a beer tasting, and it was called Meeting Expectations. And what we would do was we would take a look at a can or a bottle of beer, and we would say, read it, and we'd take a look at the graphics, include that, and say, well, what does the brewer, does their publicity department, their advertising department want me to believe is in this container? And Jerry would crack it open and pour it, and we would try it out. And if it met expectations, we got a thumbs up. And if it didn't meet expectations, it got a thumbs down. Sometimes we had an exceeding expectations, and we didn't quite know what to do about that except to celebrate. So we usually finished that. That was an empty bottle tasting, that was for sure. And every once in a while, a spirit stops by. And yesterday, a spirit stopped by here, Madame Petrini from Utah. And we had a little taste of Madame Petrini's gin. And this was the second time we tasted it, and this time it was solo rather than with the rest of the kids, and it was just as tasty as before. So every once in a while, a spirit stops in, and because we're all friends in fermentation, you have to ferment something before you can distill it. So no matter what it is, whether it's a grain or whether it's potatoes or anything, it has to start out with a sugar solution, ferment it, and then distill it. So we're all friends in fermentation. That said, the Old Growler would, well, we're going to do the tasting the similar way, except that for one little bit of a change. And that is when we taste the beer, when I taste the beer, we're going to take a look and see if it meets expectations, it gets a 2. If it exceeds expectations, it gets a 1. And if it doesn't meet expectations, it gets the other number. And so that is how we're going to do things starting out. We started, I believe it was yesterday, the day before, and it seemed to work fairly well. And so today we're going to retry, and this is a single cut plastic plastic watering can, which is, I believe, 2 Old Growlers ago. And I happen to like single cut, and I also happen to have liked this beer, so I'm going to indulge myself. Yeah, I'm allowed to. I already know what it's pretty much, what I thought it was, what it tasted like the other day. I've got a little information, I believe, hidden away. That it comes from a kind of a rock song, although I don't know what they call it these days. I used to call it rock and roll, but it's not. It's kind of kind of shy. It's similar to the styles of beer. There's more styles of beer now than you can shake a stick at. I don't know half of them. There's got to be at least 300 of them, they call it now. So it's the same thing with music, or with beer. They've got more styles of beer and more types of music. And well, anyways, so I'm going to try this a little bit later. And that's how it's going to work. And then for those of you who stay around after the tasting, then it comes to the war stories. Back in the old days, back in 1990, where is it? Yes, back in 1997, I published my second book. It is Cooking and Eating with Beer. and I had a chance to interview. But it says 50 chefs, brewmasters, and restaurateurs talk about beer and food, and there's 75 recipes in here. But I know I interviewed at least 100 chefs to talk to them about what it was like to work with beer. And the book, essentially, I allow the chefs to do the talking and to tell about their recipes. And we have a list of beer menus so that you can take a look at the recipe and see where it fit into the menu. It was a lot of fun to write that book. It went to paperback a year later. And one of the people I interviewed was a chef by the name of Rick Moonen. And I'm going to talk about Rick later on. So that's the war story for today. And it goes under, later on you'll be able to find it in the playlists here. It'll be called My Life as a Professional Barfly. So that is pretty much an explanation for it. I've been writing about beer and the hospitality industry and most of the alcohol beverage industry for about 35 years now. So it's time to put it all down in, I was going to say on paper, but you don't put it down on paper anymore. It's simply written. Although I don't inscribed, electronically preserved. That's it. I'm going to electronically preserve a section of history from, say, around 1976 to the close down. I think till the pandemic. That would be a perfect ending to it, because the hospitality industry is going to change tremendously after we get out of this. And so essentially, I'll be telling the story of the hospitality industry from the late 1970s to when it changed dramatically. And so you can look forward to that book as well. It'll probably be print and video and all kinds of good stuff. So we got a lot of stuff going here at the Old Growler. All right. So that is the way it's set up. There's two sections in these live productions, and you will be able to see the live productions. I hope to do, well, I know that I'll be doing 50 of them for sure. And after that, we'll also be doing live productions, but it will probably be only 2 a week, Monday and Wednesday, and then it will be split up the different playlists. You'll have the playlist of the tasting part and the Old Growler. And so we'll be working things that way. That way it gives me a chance to spend a couple of days, 3 days a week maybe, going out and, well, you can't go out right now, but certainly go Skyping and trying to get some interviews on the radio, on the telephone and that type of thing, because we really do have to get back. I want to find out what the different brewers are doing, particularly at this time where it is very difficult. In fact, I have some beers being delivered today by, I believe it's Crown and Growler. Crown and Scepter. Let me find out. But it's one of the breweries in Soho that I had a chance to stop by and see their production 3 or 4 months ago. And so I decided to see if they delivered as well. The Single Cut, I believe, also delivers. We're going to be going maybe over to see them in a little while. On Saturdays, it's a busy day, of course, for all of the breweries and the small breweries, but they do have pickup outside as well. And I'm lucky enough that my wife is working in. She's a man works for a large corporation and is able to take some time off during the day so we can make a beer run. She drives me to drink, and I'm forever grateful. Okay, well, that's the first part of the Old Growler today, and I want to thank everybody who is here today and everybody who is watching. And we're going to take a look at the Single Cut once again. So for heaven's sake, don't go back 2 days from now in the past and watch that before you watch this. And if you watched that one, you're going to be probably surprised as to if there was a difference in my perceptions of this beer. Okay, let's take a look at it. It's a very hip. I guess that's what it is, a hip, cool. I just found out that this meant rock on or metal, so I just hand signals across the Brooklyn Bridge. Tomorrow or Monday we'll talk about how New Yorkers are starting to look each other in the eye, and eye contact in New York City was never something you did, but that's another story. Here we go. Single Cut. Okay, the mastery knows no shortcut. They call themselves brewsmiths rather than brewers. I thought that was kind of cool. Green plastic watering can, DDH IIPA. Now, for those of you who are beer geeks, you realize that that is double dry hopped Imperial India Pale Ale. You have to translate. See, the brewer, the beer geeks have a jargon now, and so you have to learn how to speak beer. And that's one of the acronyms and the initials. They don't want to spell it all out. It takes too much room on the can. Now, this is an ale. It's 1 pint. Very good. 8.0% alcohol by volume and 90 IBUs. Brewed and canned by Stillcut Brewsmiths, Astoria, New York City, and Clifton Park, New York, probably where they have the larger brewing production. Although I have been in, no, I've not been in Stillcut. I've been in the Threes. We'll have to bring the Threes back again. That's a good brewery. So anyways, singlecut.com, and it says, drink ASAP in a clean, wide-mouth glass. Store cold and upright. Well, I don't drink ASAP. I drink beer, and well, a clean wide mouth glass. I've been using these wine glasses, white wine glasses. This is a semi-white wine. It's almost a red wine. We got a bit of a tool to it, but anyways, so I can gather the aroma in it, and all of the beers get tasted in a similar type of a wine glass, so that they don't have a disadvantage of the type of glass. So let's see here. Just I got to remember what they said about drinking this. Cold, store, and upright, unfiltered. Pour carefully. Okay. So the way I've been handling that can, abusing it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cracked it open. We're going to see what Single Cuts green. Green plastic watering can, and then the rest of it. Green plastic watering can. I remember this pouring a lot better than it did the last time. Well, the way Groundhog Day today has been going, it's I don't remember breakfast. Although I know I had tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch. I can remember that far back. When I say hoppy nose, the hops are a flower. They're very closely related to cannabis, so you can think of the same type of oil that cannabis gives off. Well, if you know about cannabis. Anyways, the hop gives off has an oil in it, and the oil is very volatile, and so that's what you smell when you do. You get a lot of that, a little bit of a roast of the grain now as well. And as you can see, it's that wonderful cloudy beer that everybody seems all lushed about. It's got an apricot flavor to it. I don't know if I noticed that the first time, but yeah, I would almost say that this was made with apricots. It's wonderfully effervescent. I won't take that away from it. It's very, very nice as far as that's concerned. So the appearance is right on. The aroma certainly was most pleasant. And when I say sip, my sip is most people's quaff. So bear with me. Oh, that's the most refreshing beer. Maybe with just some lightly roasted almonds, or perhaps pecans. Okay, from Texas, pecan. Yeah. Well, I'll have to go back and check myself, and I'll put a link down in the comments box, or well, the description box, as to what I thought of this originally, and so we can compare the two, and I'll have that written out. And that's what we'll do. All right. Well, it exceeds expectations. So in this case, single cut gets a 1. Single cuts plastic green plastic watering can, and I'll put the lyrics of the musical exercise in which the words were used, and it has to do with a plastic tree and a plastic world and a plastic, and the beer was better than the lyrics, I thought, but that's just me. I'm one of those things. Moving through my little bit of a script here. Okay, we've done the feature tasting, and okay, now comes fun. Well, to me, the fun, another good fun part. My life as a professional barfly, and I tell it from when I was at University of Norwich until today, when we've closed down all the bars and taverns. And today I'm going to talk about a person that I was incredibly lucky to meet, a fellow by the name of Rick Moonen. And back in 1978, I believe it was, or maybe 79, I was part of the New York City Homebrewers Club. And Rick Moonen visited the club. He was introduced around. He was a fellow from New York, and so he was very excited about how beer was made and wanted to know a lot about home brewing. And so I met him at the club, and he asked if he could stop by here. We just moved in, I guess. No, I had to. It was here, so we moved into here 30 years ago. 85. No, my daughter was born in 85. She was 3 years old, so it was 88. We moved into here in 88, and that was when I bumped into Chef Moonen, and he stopped by the apartment to learn how to homebrew. He asked if he could stop by and learn how to homebrew, and so I said, sure, no problem. And so the doorman, we live in a doorman building, 16 stories, built in 1951. It's one of the oldest co-ops in New York City, if not New York State. And so he was buzzed in and buzzed up. The doorman buzzed him up, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. We're on the 3rd floor, and it was taking a while. And finally, I opened up the door to take a look down the hall, and there he is. He's walking up and down the hall. And he noticed me. Oh, okay. And he comes down, and we shook hands. So come on in. And he said, the hallways in apartments in New York City always smell so good. And coming from a chef, I thought that was kind of fun. And so he learned. I showed him the techniques that I used to homebrew. And then he went on to go to the Water Club. He was the chef at the Water Club, and also he had his own restaurant, CCC, Chefs and Culinarians Club, and some other places. He finally opened his own place, RM, here in Manhattan, or over in Manhattan. And all the time, I was learning, and we talked back and forth about beer. And his particular thing, he's very Piscean. He loved fish, and in fact, he is known as the godfather of fish sustainability. And he has been working to work with the fisheries and have the coexistence between fisheries and restaurants, and how people can associate with fish. And he's incredible with that. He's got a couple of places in Vegas, and I was I just felt he was a wonderful man to talk to, and we still email back and forth. It was really good. Before I decided to stream today, I figured just beforehand I would Google him up, and I did, and I found him on Wikipedia, and I am to the fact that this is quite a culinary reputation, and this is just a small part of it. Rick Moonen is an American seafood chef with an early adapter of sustainable fishing practices. He's known as the godfather of sustainability. Graduated first in his class from the CIA Culinary Institute of America, and went to work in New York's Le Côte Basque, Le Cercle, and the Water Club, where he commanded the kitchen for 6 years. He then became executive chef and partner at Oceana before he opened RM in New York, which earned 3 stars from the New York Times. Also proprietor in the high-end Greek restaurant Malivos, which also received 3 stars from the New York Times. Rick was one of the very few chefs in New York to have 3 stars for 2 separate open restaurants in New York. In 2005, Moonen closed the New York restaurant RM in order to open Rick Moonen's RM Seafood and R Bar Cafe at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. What a reputation! It blows me away. But somewhere between the Water Club and Oceana, he ran a place called CCC, as I said, Chefs and Culinaries Club, and that was probably around 88, because he was very interested in beer lists and putting together beer and food. And one of the beers that he was very fascinated with was the Anchor our Special Ale, and I'll give a link below. We tasted some of our Special Ale a little while ago. In fact, yes, we did. I believe it was a 1999 version, and so he was very interested in it. And the fact is, while he was at the pardon me, at the Water Club, when he started at the Water Club, there was a beverage manager by the name of Sam Correnti there, and Sam was heavy into beer as well. And the interesting thing is that the Water Club is a major white tablecloth restaurant in New York City, and this is the beer list that they had. And on draft, it was Anchor Steam. Amber lagers, they had Brooklyn Lager, Dos Equis, and New Amsterdam. So you had right off 3 American, now the top 4 3 American beers and 2 New Yorks. Ales, Bass and Molson Golden. Dark ales, Beck's and Guinness Stout. And you put that down as a dark beer. Lagers, Beck's, Budweiser, Coors Extra, from Mexico, Corona. Oh, sorry, read that wrong. Corona, Max Extra from Mexico. Foster's Lager, Heineken, Moosehead, and Spaten. Authentic Pilsner style was from the Pilsner Urquell from Czechoslovakia. The low-calorie beers, he had Amstel, Dry Becks, and Miller Lite, and the non-alcohol Caliber from Ireland, from Guinness, and Wartec from Switzerland. So back then, the Water Club had a beer list, and that was rather remarkable for that time. That time in New York City's culinary history. And one of the fun things is Rick Moonen was the exec chef for some of the okay, let me switch this over here. This would be one of the menus that they had, and it was a lot of fun to go visit. And I believe, and I'm not mistaken, we went there for our either 15th or 20th wedding anniversary, and it was just a marvelous tasting menu. And Rick Moonen, I thank you, Chef Moonen, I thank you very much for that. But the interesting thing is the proprietor, it has here as Michael O'Keefe, and executive chef Rick Moonen, and Michael, I believe, went under the name of Buzzy O'Keefe, and he ran 3 or 4 restaurants in New York that were just marvelous places. Okay, well, before he left New York, Rick opened up RM, which was a fine seafood restaurant. It was after Oceana, and he opened it, I believe, on August 30th, 2002. And here is the menu for the opening, signed by the sommelier and Rick Moonen and his exec chef, and we've got 4 signatures on there, so 5. So it was quite an event. Lucky enough to be there. It was $55 a person back in 2002, So that shows you how prices have changed. Started out with some Spanish mackerel and with laurel and celery, yellowtail tucky, upstate farm peach and avocado, Pine Island oysters, cucumber sorbet, preserved lemon cured Arctic char. That was just to start with. In seconds, black Dalcan shallow poached Atlantic cod. We had a halibut confit, pancetta wrapped wild striped bass, and a Florida red snapper with corn fondue, oven dried tomatoes. Dessert was also wonderful. A floating watermelon floating island, upstate farm peach tartine, black fig and port terrine, passion fruit vanilla creamsicle, yazoo bako, which is a raspberry sorbet cannoli, green tea emulsion, and banana rice crisp tart. And it was chef owner Rick Moonen and co-chefs Anthony Amoroso and Matthew Acarino, staff pastry chef Pichon. So it was quite a remarkable remarkable dinner, and I learned an awful lot from Rick, particularly in the pairing of fish and beers and the different styles. It went along similar to how you would do wines, with the exception of, and this one I found most remarkable, was caviar, either beluga, savruga, or even whitefish, or salmon. Any one of those caviars, everyone thinks champagne. And I was surprised when Chef Moonen said that his favorite beverage with caviar was a Pilsner, particularly Pilsner Urquell, a very light lager beer, because the saline in the caviar clashes with the acid in the champagne, particularly the fact that the champagne is carbonated, highly carbonated, and the CO2 is carbonic acid, and that adds a little bit of bite to the tongue. So you have the bite of that tongue with the saline, and it's interesting, but it doesn't have the same reaction that your taste receptors would have to a lager. Well, there we go, right here, with a light lager. The flavor, you've got a little bit of hops in there, but you have the lower grain, the little sweetness of that grain to go with the salinity. And you know how salt and sweet go together. So it was quite a learning experience. And so, as with all of these chats about my life as a professional barfly, I hoped always to end up, and I will always end up, with having learned something about either the person or the dinner or the restaurant or the event. And this is one of the things that I really did learn from Chef Moonen, was that the flavors of beers and the flavors of fish, you work with them, and you have a particular type of sweetness and bitterness balanced in your beers, depending on how heavily roasted it is and how heavily hopped it is. And you can play with that with basic fish dishes. And it's always, they seem to go together, particularly oysters. Oysters and Guinness, one of the great combinations. I would say peel your own shrimp, and again, a light lager. One of my favorite memories of peel your own shrimp was at the Shinnecock boat station, which was a kind of a ramshackle little restaurant out on Long Island, and sitting there with pitchers of Budweiser and piles of shrimp, and eventually piles of shrimp shells. So it was, those are the flavors that you can play with, particularly when you're talking Piscean. Oh, Well, I've certainly enjoyed this session with the Old Growler. I hope you have. We've had a couple of beers. The single cut, which was a retaste, and starting on Monday, we will have the beers from that I've ordered up from. I keep thinking Crown and Scepter, and that's not the name of it. And let me just flip around to see if I can. Okay, here we go. Torch and Crown beers. Share House. It will be a summer Kolsch, 5% alcohol by volume. DFM, an experimental hop IPA. I'll have to figure out what the DFM2 is for. That's around 6.7% ABV. So you got a Kolsch, an IPA, an American Pilsner tenement, 4.9% ABV, a nice session beer, and Intersect, which is Sabro and Citra, 2 hops, and they're playing games with hops. So we'll be able to taste some interesting hopped beers next week. So those will be the 4 to start with, and hopefully we can finish up with another Brooklyn beer. We kept Brooklyn beers this week, and that was why I wanted to make sure that I did do a single version or a second version of the single cut, because I wanted to make sure that we did Brooklyn beers all of this week. Okay, well, for those of you who have lasted this long, please, I thank you very much for lasting this long. I thank you very much for following me, and I would appreciate it if you subscribed, number 1. Particularly, if you give a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate that. And don't forget to share. And really, if you don't want to miss any of, especially in the future, if you don't want to miss any of the special postings that we'll be doing in the tasting notes and the Old Growler, click on the alert bell down there, and it will let you know not only when we go hot with the live presentations, but also the other 2 playlists. So it is now 5:38 on Friday, the 22nd of May, 2020, and I'm Old Growler, Pete LaFrance, hoping all of you have a great weekend. I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be having some great tastings. I'm working on an idea to possibly do a phone interview. It couldn't be on screen, but it would be on speakerphone, possibly with one of the brewers from Brooklyn. So look forward to next week. This is the Old Growler. Hoping you have a great weekend. And at this weekend, all of your beers meet expectations. You stay safe, and see you next week.